Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And as we all know already, Shadowlands is delayed and the pre-patch is here, and who knows for how long. So I thought it would be a little bit of fun here to come up with a melee DPS tier list for the specializations in PvP in the Shadowlands pre-patch. So if you're interested in my opinion and the opinion that I've collected from others from observing their streams and playing the game myself, I'm going to be constructing this list and going over the pros and maybe some of the cons as well of picking some of these specializations if you're looking to try and blast some battlegrounds in the downtime before Shadowlands. And I'll also be looking into the future with some of them, as maybe perhaps they're underperforming right now, but in Shadowlands they get a lot of quality of life improvements through legendaries, conduits, or covenant abilities. So you would want to take that into consideration as well, and potentially consider some dual spec options, something like maybe even playing Unholy now, Frost later. These are the types of things that I'm going to be taking into consideration. So now, of course, in the pre-patch, essences are enabled. You have Azerite traits as well. So, and you've got the current PvE trinkets available to these specializations, which are enabling them a lot more in some cases than in Shadowlands itself. So you may have something to look forward to if you're playing one of those underdog specializations. But let's get started. We've got the Arms Warrior here. It received a lot of returned utility. I've seen a lot of warriors getting their sword and board swap macros back so they can use shield block. They've got Ignore Pain from Protection, which is this big absorb effect. It's a specialization that is just slamming damage right now. It's just overall feeling really good, and it's strong. In my mind, it's a good pick in Shadowlands, and it's also a good pick in the pre-patch up to it. So this is a spec that I wouldn't imagine is going to get gutted or nerfed, as it's also kind of underperforming, at least in Shadowlands, the expansion itself, PvE. So it likely, in my mind, it's not overperforming in anything. It's just really good, fun, solid, all-around specialization. I'm putting it on the A tier. Assassination, this is a specialization that was benefiting heavily from corruption in Battle for Azeroth, more particularly the Gushing Wounds, and it is now feeling the pain and the drawback of Gushing Wounds being removed. It's also feeling the pain of its other specialization, its relative, the Subtlety Rogue, doing a lot better. So in my mind, Assassination is starting to struggle a bit. It would have been an S tier in Battle for Azeroth, but now in the Shadowlands pre-patch, for me, Assassination is falling a little bit short. It still brings in strong poison, snares, effects, and consistent damage, but its reset potential, its burst damage isn't there. And right now in the pre-patch in PvP, it's all about burst damage, 100 KOs. And a pretty big advantage to that playstyle is the fact that they've removed the Gladiator's Medallion as an honor talent. And a lot of players just don't even know that it's gone, and they don't know where it went, and they don't know how to get it. So a lot of people, when you're doing these battlegrounds and arenas in the pre-patch, you stun them, they can't get out, and they don't know why, and they don't know where to get it, and that's a big advantage, obviously, to a lot of heavy bursty specs, and Assassination is just falling a little bit short in that regard, and its sustainability is not really there. In my mind, it's about middle of the pack, a B tier now. Enhancement Shaman, this is a specialization that in Shadowlands is receiving a lot of things that make it really good. Things like Chain Harvest from the Venthyr Covenant, or even Fey Transfusion from the Night Fey Covenant, make Enhancement Shaman very bursty in Shadowlands, but those Covenant abilities are not available in the pre-patch. Also, some legendaries such as the Restoration Shaman, Earthshield legendary, the Earthen Harmony, making their Earthshield heal for a lot, and Soulbind conduits that buff their healing stream. These are not available in the pre-patch. These are things that make Enhancement Shaman durable in Shadowlands and allow it to stay alive to these moments where it goes for heavy burst, Ascendance, Chain Harvest damage. It doesn't have it right now. It's still just a fish that flops around like a magic carp. In my mind, I'm putting Enhancement Shaman on the D tier. You may be able to take on a couple of 1v1s or something in a battleground, but if you're ever running into a team fight, yeah, you just fall over first. You don't get to do too much. It's not a great time in the pre-patch, unfortunately. And it is, in my mind, a bit of a risky spec to invest in Shadowlands, because you rely so heavily on things that I'm not sure if will remain as powerful as they are. These Covenant one-shots and these kind of using the healing specializations, legendaries, and conduits to try and benefit. These are things that I would feel like in the past historically have been nerfed in PvP, and it's just base kit isn't there. You're not going to have fun not being able to move around. I wouldn't recommend it. Feral Druid, on the other hand, is very bursty. Cyclone is now baseline, enabling its honor talents to a larger degree. It's not super reliant on things like the Shadowlands Covenants, like Enhancement Shaman is. You've got high mobility, reset potential, good crowd control, nice burst with ferocious bite. In my mind, this is a specialization, again, that's not overperforming in any aspect of the game so much that I think it would get nerfed, and it's just solid and strong all around. So by that definition, I think that we're going to have to land the Feral Druids into the A tier currently. Now, Frost Death Knight, similarly to Assassination Rogue, was benefiting heavily from the corruption effects, whether you were running a full versatility, gushing, or mastery build to increase your damage output or reduce your damage taken. This is a specialization that is lacking the Covenant ability, Abomination's Limb, to pull targets together. It's currently lacking legendaries that allow it to stun targets with Sindragosa, and it needs the modifiers from the legendaries to increase its obliterate damage. So it's just falling short in everything at the moment, in my mind, with the pre-patch. But it could be a spec that is worth investing in, or getting your cloak and your neck leveled up a bit so you can use it to level to max level in Shadowlands, because the Covenants and the legendaries do bring up its power quite a lot. But currently, in my mind, Frost Death Knight, it's just not 100% there in the pre-patch. You could make it work, but again, this is to try and be more of like a recommendation, and its overall performance I don't think is there. I think it took more of a hit losing the things that it did from BFA than it did gaining a bit of extra utility and spells. It does get some GCD quality of life, much like Unholy, but it's not there for me at the moment. It's too reliant on the obliterate modifiers that aren't in the game just yet. So I'm going to be putting it about the same tier as Assassination at this point in time. Fury Warrior, on the other hand, now in Shadowlands, I feel like I'm going to need to keep testing Fury Warrior because it did get buffed, and those buffs are noticeable in the pre-patch. It's a lot more durable. I would not say that it's an arms warrior, right? But I would also say that I think it is doing better than something like an Enhancement Shaman in the pre-patch specifically. So if you're looking to get your Fury fix and you want to try maybe that single-minded Fury build, or still stick to the Titan's grip, I think that it is doing a lot better than in Shadowlands. But then again, if you want to gear it up to level, you may want to consider switching to arms. Still lacking the Mortal Strike comparatively to Arms Warrior is the major drawback, and Arms Warrior even gets to enhance their Mortal Strike effect with Sharpened Blade. So it's got okay mobility, okay sustain, although it did receive some nerfs overall in the game. Its damage buff that it got right before the pre-patch is definitely noticeable. It's a lot better, but not by too much. In my mind, I'd put it about a C at this current time for Fury Warrior. Demon Hunter, similar boat here as the Assassination Rogue. This is a spec that was relying heavily on things like gushing wounds or versatility corruptions. It's also a spec that received the most amount of nerfs in terms of reducing its leech, so the healing it gets when it attacks, its reductions in its damage reduction from blur, its major cooldown, its removal of its dodge immunity on Blade Dance. And for the most part, some of these nerfs have been redistributed into conduits, so you'll be able to buff your tattoos, which is magic damage reduction passive over time, or get things that reduce the cooldown of your blur from your soulbind conduits, but those things aren't available in the pre-patch. So basically those are just gone. You just got nerfed really heavily. You can still make it work. I've been watching some Demon Hunter streamers. I still see it played at high ratings, but as like an overall spec, I think it has fallen down a couple of paces in terms of what you can do with it, especially when it comes to random battlegrounds. And while you can still make it work, I don't think it's as good as it was, so in my mind, it's falling down to about a B. Middle of the pack, whereas before it might have been an A or close to an S, but Demon Hunter definitely felt the pain of the changes, and then is going to have to wait until Shadowlands, which even then you're still somewhat reliant on things like Covenant abilities like Sinful Brand doing 30% of your damage. You're still not in a great position. In my mind, Demon Hunter is a little bit on the fence in terms of if you may want to invest in it as a main, and I don't think it's at that spectacular pre-patch feel and vibe like some of the other specializations here. And I am doing my best to not put them all in the same tier. I'll have you know that, okay? Just for all the critics out there. Outlaw Rogue. Now, another thing to note with Shadowlands and the pre-patch as well is that in PvP in the past, I believe crit damage was only 150% increase, and now it's 200%. An Outlaw Rogue with Between the Eyes turning into a crit modifier it's heavily reliant on crits. It can do a lot of burst damage, and players, again, don't have Gliders Medallions likely to trinket out of stuns. So Outlaw Rogue can sneak up on a target, nuke it down really quickly, and then escape to safety, much like Subtlety. It doesn't do it as good as Subtlety, but it's doing a lot better than it was prior to the pre-patch. Whereas before the pre-patch, you were kind of just a spite spec. You had blind on a short cooldown, so you could blind spite, but you were really non-existent. Whereas now in the pre-patch, if you want to check out the pirates, I think they're doing a lot better. It's really tough for me to put it on the same tier as Arms Warrior or Feral Druid. I think that it fits better on the B tier, middle of the pack, evening out with Assassination overall when it comes to PvP. So if you're looking to make a switch and try maybe one of the other rogue specs, you're just tired of Assassination, you've played it for 2 years, I think that it is now equally competitive with Assassination. There's no way it's close to sub, but it's still a much better spec in the pre-patch than it was in Battle for Azeroth. Now, Ret Paladins, this is a specialization that has been tearing things up, to say the least. Templar's Verdict does a lot of damage. Execution Sentence does a lot of damage. And Ret Paladin's main advantage is immunity cooldown. So in the pre-patch, it's all about just like, all right, you're dead. I snap my fingers, I Thanos snap, you're gone. Ret Paladin can do that, but it can also Divine Shield and immune incoming snaps. So it's a great specialization at the moment in the meta. If you've watched any of my other videos about the pre-patch, you'd know that I think very highly of this spec. Word of Glory is just infinite sustain from your holy power. This is a spec that even prior to the Shadowlands Covenants, which actually enhance it even further. Things like having Night Fae for the blessings to increase your holy damage or reduce your cooldowns, or potentially going for Kyrian and getting Divine Toll for big judgment hits with synergies on your honor talents. This is a spec that's not relying on those. Those just further enhance it. Its base kit is amazing, and it fits really well into the current meta of the pre-patch. I can't not put Ret Paladin on the S tier for a PvP tier list on the pre-patch right now. It's just absolutely spectacular. It feels really good. It fits in with everything that's strong at the moment. And to match it up here on the S tier, we've got the Subtlety Rogue, which is just flat out doing a ton of damage. And again, without Gladiator's Medallions, with crit modifiers changed now, you get massive Shadow Strike crits, big Eviscerate crits, double Mark for Death, Eviscerate crits. This is a spec that just erases somebody, dips out, erases somebody, dips out, sap somebody, annoy them, push in, erase somebody, they're out. This is an amazing specialization at the moment. So if you are really tired of Assassination and you've been missing Subtlety, this pre-patch, and I mean even likely into Shadowlands, is going to be the spec. Their Covenant abilities in Shadowlands, I feel like they're still a little bit kind of a mixed bag on the table because they've received the most amount of reworks. And that's why I've been a bit hesitant with doing a review specifically for Rogue, because their Covenant abilities have dramatically changed so much in the past bit. But I will be releasing those reviews. So if you like that type of content, you want to get ready for Shadowlands, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. But right now, it's definitely S tier. There's no doubt about it. Subtlety Rogue up there on the S tier. Survival Hunter. So a big downside of the Survival Hunter is a very long casted pet res, and your pet is not, I don't know if this is an oversight, but pets are supposed to take less damage from AoE spells, so that while you're in combat, because as a hunter, whether you're Beastmaster or Survival, your pet needs to attack. You have abilities that don't work unless your pet is attacking. It's not like you can be a warlock and send your pet and hide it in the corner and not lose out on too much. Your pet has to attack. But there are AoE effects, Chill Streak, Fist of Fury. There's area of effect damage spells that are not currently being reduced on pets. The pet is just dying. I can see the gameplay that they're trying to introduce where the hunter needs to be aware of their pet and use mend pet. And I think that's a good idea in theory, but I really think that it should be looked into at all the area of effect spells and make sure that they're doing reduced damage to pets. And even still without that, teams may likely just target your pet outright. And no matter how much pet management you're doing, if a team decides to do that and then you're just stuck with I think it's a 4 to 6 second cast res, I believe it's 4, you're never finishing that cast unless you trade Aspect of the Turtle, which is your ice block, your immunity to res it. You got that big downside. It's still doing good damage, right? So something in a Jungle Cleave or a Subtlety Rogue composition, it's doing great. It's not a marksman in terms of its burst damage. And as marksman, you have the option to just get rid of your pet and play Lone Wolf, so you don't have that downside. So for me, I think Survival is falling down a lot. I would have put it on an A tier in the past for BFA, but in the pre-patch, it's not as good as Marksman, which is where it's directly competing. It's got big drawbacks with its pet. I think it's a little bit fragile. In my mind, it's falling like the middle of the pack. It's falling into the B tier. It's not up to snuff at the moment. I do hope that they look into it with the pet. I think encouraging players to manage their pet and use Ben Pet is a good idea, but double checking all the area of effect spells to make sure they're reduced, maybe even considering reducing dot damage or damage in general from players to pets, so that it can be a strategy if a hunter isn't paying attention to their pet, to kill the pet, but not how easy it is at the moment. Like a warrior with sweeping strikes will just, it dies while the warrior's not even paying attention to it. So I would like some changes there for survival, and it's going to fall in the middle of the pack as a result. Unholy Death Knight is a spec that, sure, we move into Shadowlands, you're going to get things like Abomination's Limb. It's going to be a good time overall. It was one of my recommended specs for Shadowlands. If you want to check out that video, I'll have a link to it at the end of this one. And in the pre-patch, it's performing really well as well with Azerite traits. I believe it's the Hell Chains, where you connect your Abomination yourself with this orange line. That turned into a talent, which actually scales with the Azerite traits. You get it twice. It does a lot of damage, good dot pressure, good sustain with Death Strike, repositioning targets, good 1v1, just all around a really solid spec. In my mind, even in the pre-patch, it's falling into the same camp as the Arms Warrior and the Feral Druid. I think it is performing better than Frost in the pre-patch specifically. When we move into Shadowlands, again, with Frost and Legendaries and stuff, things do even out. It becomes a little bit more of a contest. But on the pre-patch, Unholy Death Knight is in A tier at the moment. And finally, Windwalker Monk. This is a specialization that, again, is all about 100-0ing people without Gladiator's Medallions in the game. For most players who don't know where it went to go get it, or where it is to go get it, this is a spec that can take advantage of that. And now with Touch of Death being in a weird spot where if a target dips below 15% health, so Touch of Death is an execute now, right? So when a target dips below 15% health, which is what I believe it is, you can use Touch of Death to instantly kill that target. But what's happening is all you have to do is target something that's below 15% health, or in some abuse cases, target a mob that has the equivalent of 15% health, and Touch of Death will light up. And then you can target something else. Or even the target that was at 15%, if it's healed over 15%, you can still use Touch of Death on it. As long as you targeted somebody at any point that was 15% health, you can Touch of Death them at any value. That does seem like a bug. Flat out, that seems like a bug, right? So I wouldn't recommend necessarily abusing that for sure, but it's available in the game, and you may accidentally do it. You might have you were hitting somebody that dipped below 15%, and then they healed to full, and then you Touch of Death them. It's just something that can indirectly happen at the moment. Hopefully it gets addressed pretty soon, because I feel like it is being abused a little bit too much. Outside of that, if we take that off the table, right, Windwalker is a spec in Shadowlands that is relying pretty heavily on covenants, like the Venthyr one, Fallen Order to summon in a bunch of images to do damage, but it still brings in a lot of the strong synergies right now in the pre-patch, which is just heavy burst damage, run somebody over in a stun with Fist of Fury, still has high mobility, still has good instant healing with Expel Harm, still has good healing with Vivify and mobility. It's a solid spec in my mind, and no doubt it deserves to be in an A tier spot. If this was actually about Shadowlands itself, maybe it gets bumped up a bit from what the Covenants bring to the table, but it's a middle of the pack, and with that bug aside for the Windwalker Monk. We've got our tier list here. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a lot of fun. I hope that you're having fun in the pre-patch. You're able to get all of your stuff up and going, moving into Shadowlands. If you want to be the most prepared for Shadowlands, I'm doing my best to be a resource for that, providing content every single day. So subscribing to the channel is a great way to know when my videos are going live, and come check out the ones that interest you the most. And again, I'm going to have links to videos here for my class recommendations, links to videos for other tier lists as well, if you're really trying to dive deep into the nitty-gritty of what is the best at what. That is the main purpose of the channel. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, leave it with a like, comment down below with your thoughts, and I will see you in the next video.